Hi there, I'm a guy, and today we're going to be talking all about stress. Now, some of you may be wondering, what is stress? Why do I have to go through it? Why isn't everyone as incredibly dashing and handsome as this random guy who just hopped over his couch? Well, to answer that last question, I have no idea. But today, we're going to be talking about what we know about stress, why we go through it, how it affects our mental and physical health, and strategies that you at home can use to help handle it when it becomes too overwhelming. Sounds pretty epic, right? Now, before we get into what stress actually is, I want to make it clear that stress is a completely normal phenomenon. It's something that all human beings go through in their day-to-day life, regardless of their race, age, gender, anything. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. Therefore, we're not going to be discussing ways to suppress or completely erase one's day-to-day stress. Rather, we're going to talk about a few creative ways that you can help deal with it a little bit when it gets to be too much. So without further ado, let's get into things. We'll start things off by answering a simple question. Just what is stress? I'm sure it's a word a lot of you have heard and even used in the past before, but I still think it would help to establish a verbal definition. Well, to put it simply, stress is the human body's internal reaction to any external force of mental or physical pressure. What's a force of mental or physical pressure, you might be wondering? Think of a time when you had to meet a tight deadline on something. For instance, a college psychology project which you had to finish within the span of 2 days. Surely the pressure of needing to get this task done in such a short time elicited some sort of reaction out of you. Perhaps you started to feel worried over the prospect of getting it done late or never finishing it at all. This might have manifested in the form of physical reactions, such as rocking back and forth in your seat or biting your nails, as well as involuntary ones such as hyperventilating or sweating at the brow. Perhaps you began muttering to yourself and shaking uncontrollably as the pressure took its toll on you. Maybe this even escalated to the point of you screaming loudly as you ran out to your backyard like a madman and began stripping down your underwear. Okay, that's a bit of an extreme example, but I'm sure you get what I mean. We experience stress on a near day-to-day basis from all sorts of different sources. It can be something good, like having a first date, or something not so good, like having a kidney stone. It can be anything as small as seeing a spider in your room, or as big as being chased through the woods by a giant man-eating spider. Furthermore, these stressful events usually elicit some sort of reaction within our bodies. We already saw the inconceivable horrors of attending college, but reactions to stress can vary greatly depending on both the person and the stressor in question. For instance, you may have an emotional reaction such as feeling fear, anxiety, sadness or depression, or even anger. You may also have some sort of physical reactions such as headaches, nausea, and hair loss. In extreme cases, you may have trouble sleeping, an affected appetite, or even sexual challenges. Point is, everybody reacts differently to stress, and identifying those responses is a key part of being able to handle stressful situations. But before we discuss how to deal with stress, I think we need to talk more about what stress is. I mean, yeah, we know what it is now. But why does it happen? How do we know that it happens? In order to understand that, I think it's time for a little history lesson. The concept of stress in living organisms was first coined by a Hungarian endocrinologist and world's biggest tobacco fan, Hans Selye, who referred to it as a non-specific response of the body to any demand. Born in Vienna on January 26, 1907, Selye began attending Charles University in Prague at age 17, where he studied medicine and organic chemistry before later transferring to McGill University in Montreal, Canada, where he became an assistant professor in biology. In other words, this dude was pretty dang smart. His concept of biological stress first came to him while partaking in ward rounds during his second year of medical school. There, he observed that despite having vastly different illnesses, many of his patients showed a number of similar symptoms, such as weight loss and sleep deprivation. This This observation would be expanded upon several years later through medical experiments performed by Saley while in Montreal. These experiments involved the use of several rats, whom Saley would put through varying stressful events before studying their physical reactions to said situations. Saley found that the rats' responses were strikingly similar in every case, usually coming in the form of peptic ulcers, lymphatic atrophy, and increased activity in the adrenal glands. Saley concluded that these reactions were occurring due to the rats' bodies trying to maintain homeostasis. In other words, they were experiencing similar forms of stress. These studies ultimately led Saley to develop a concept which he referred to as general adaptation syndrome, also referred to as simply Saley's syndrome. This condition divides the stress reaction into 3 phases: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. According to Saley's syndrome, after the initial shock of being in a stressful situation, an individual tries to resist the situation in order to maintain homeostasis, after which they go through a period of downfall, or exhaustion. Saley's concept of gradual adaptation ties directly into the biological process of stress, which similarly involves a period of rapid escalation followed by gradual exhaustion. See, stress is a neurological process. That is to say, most of what goes on during it happens in our brains. Think of it as a step-by-step process in which our brain tells the rest of our body that is about to go down. Basically, when our brain detects some form of danger or distress, sensory information is sent to the amygdala, the part of our brain which controls our emotions. Then the amygdala sends a distress signal to another part of our brain called the hypothalamus, which can basically be thought of as a control center responsible for communicating information to the rest of our body. Finally, the hypothalamus sends a signal to the nervous system, which then starts releasing stress hormones. And stress hormones are pretty much the reason why you feel all worked up whenever there's an imminent threat. Now, there are 2 main types of stress hormones. One of these is called adrenaline. And some of you probably know what adrenaline is. Basically, it gets pumped into your bloodstream by your adrenal glands, and it makes your heart rate go up, it makes your blood rate go up, it makes you get all sweaty. It's pretty much the reason for that sudden burst of energy whenever you're freaking out. Then the second stress hormone that gets released is called cortisol. And cortisol is pretty much the stress hormone. It releases blood into your glucose, and it pretty much causes you to get all worked up whenever you're stressed out. So, yeah. Also, I forgot to mention that once the threat is perceived as being gone, the adrenal glands stop releasing the stress hormones and then tells the body to pretty much chill out, and then you stop being stressed. I'm not redoing that shot because I already used 3 post-it notes, but I feel like that's important information, so I'm sloppily including it. And if you have a problem with that, then fuck! All of this is to say that stress is, again, a completely normal part of human life. It's a totally automatic response, and most people experience it during their day-to-day activities. Stress can even be considered a good thing in most cases, as it keeps us motivated and ready in the face of daunting and scary situations. It often comes about from good situations in the first place, and even when it doesn't, it still keeps us alert and ready to handle whatever's on our plates. But while there's certainly a healthy side of stress, it's about time we looked at the unhealthy side of it. While stress is by no means always a bad thing, there's most certainly such thing as too much of it, and a buildup of too much stress can negatively affect a person's physical and mental health in various ways. Stress is supposed to be a temporary phenomenon. We go through it and then it goes away once the causing entity is past. This type of short-term stress is called acute stress, and it's the kind that everyone experiences. You know, the healthy kind. Many people, however, experience a prolonged form of stress. This is known as chronic stress, and it can be caused by any number of long-term factors, such as being in college or having a difficult day-to-day job. It can lead to a number of side effects like insomnia, weight gain, and of course, tons of anxiety. Fortunately, there are various fun and healthy activities that one can take part in order to minimize the impact of stress. We'll end things off by showing a montage of just a few of these messages that you yourself can use at home if your stress just gets to be too much. Before that, though, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me today on this totally awesome journey through the world of stress. I certainly hope you've learned a thing or two about it, and that you'll come out with a better idea of how to stay on top of your stress when it gets to be just too much. Until then, sayonara. Seven, 21, 22, 23, 24, 4. There are times when the weight of the world is just too much to handle for one individual. But once the pressure starts to get to your head, just find something else to do instead. You might find that the problems in your life are stacking up like dominoes and causing you strife. But it always helps to find the things that make you want to dance and sing. You've got to open your heart. Just try to loosen up. Don't let the weight get to you. And no, you're not the only one who has so much to get through. You gotta spruce it up, 'cause that's what life's all about. Don't stress it, confess it, you know you can't repress it, so just let it all out. Yeah, yeah. You gotta loosen up. Don't let the weight get to you. When there's a lot to swallow, it just means you got a lot to chew. Spruce it up, baby, 'cause that's what it's all about. Don't stress it, confess it, you know you can't repress it, so just let it all out. Yeah. Good morning. It's good enough.